The world of the 17th century Puritans was a harsh one, built on a foundation of unyielding religious doctrine. They had left England to create a perfect society, a beacon of piety in the New World, but life was fraught with hardship. They faced brutal winters, devastating diseases, and violent conflicts with Native American tribes, like the recent King Philip's War. In their worldview, the devil was not a metaphor but a tangible, ever-present threat, actively seeking to corrupt their souls and dismantle their holy community. This anxiety was stoked by influential ministers like Increase Mather and his son, Cotton Mather. Their widely circulated books and pamphlets on witchcraft described the devil's methods in terrifying detail, making the supernatural threat feel immediate and real. This wasn't happening in a vacuum. The Massachusetts colony was in political chaos after England's Glorious Revolution, leaving it without a valid charter or a governor with clear authority. The community was deeply divided. The more rural Salem village was resentful of the wealthier, more powerful Salem town. Villagers argued bitterly over land, property lines, and their own religious independence. They longed for their own church and minister, separate from the one in town, but the process was plagued with conflict. After 2 ministers left over salary disputes, the village finally managed to ordain Reverend Samuel Parris. It was not a popular choice. Parris was a rigid and greedy man who, instead of healing the community's divisions, deepened them by publicly punishing anyone who fell short of his strict moral standards. The winter of 1691 was exceptionally harsh, adding another layer of misery and dread to an already fractured and fearful populace. His 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, began to exhibit terrifying behavior. They screamed, threw objects, contorted their bodies into unnatural positions, and complained of being pinched and pricked by invisible forces. When a local doctor could find no physical cause, he diagnosed their affliction as the work of witchcraft. Soon, other young girls in the village, like Ann Putnam Jr., began showing the same hysterical symptoms. Pressured to name their tormentors, the girls pointed their fingers at 3 women on the margins of society. The first was Tituba, Reverend Parris's enslaved woman, an easy target due to her race and outsider status. The next were Sarah Good, a destitute and homeless beggar, and Sarah Osborne, a woman embroiled in a legal dispute over an inheritance. Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne maintained their innocence, but Tituba, likely under duress, confessed. She spun a fantastical tale of the devil forcing her to sign his book and claimed she had seen the names of other witches within its pages. This confession was the crucial turning point. It proved that there was a satanic conspiracy at work in Salem, sending a shockwave of panic through the colony. The accusations began to fly, no longer limited to social outcasts. Respected, church-going women like Martha Corey and Rebecca Nurse were accused, shocking the community. If these pious women could be witches, then anyone could. The colony established a special court of oyer and terminer, meaning to hear and determine. A key and fatal feature of these trials was the acceptance of spectral evidence, the accusers' claims that they were being tormented by the ghostly specter of the accused, an apparition that no one else could see. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop, a woman known for her less-than-puritanical lifestyle, became the first person executed, hanged on Gallows Hill. The court, emboldened by a cautious endorsement from Cotton Mather, continued its work with terrifying efficiency. Throughout the summer and early fall, the gallows saw more victims. Among them was Reverend George Burroughs, a former minister of Salem Village. As he stood at the gallows, he recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly, something a witch was thought incapable of doing. The crowd was visibly shaken, and for the first time, serious doubts began to surface. Accused of witchcraft, he refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty, a move that legally blocked the court from trying him and seizing his property from his sons. To force a plea, the court ordered him subjected to peine forte et dure, a brutal form of torture where heavy stones were slowly piled onto his chest. For 3 days, Corey endured the crushing weight. When the sheriff demanded his plea, his only response was more weight. He died under the immense pressure, his will unbroken and his estate preserved for his family. This barbaric act further turned public opinion against the trials. Governor William Phipps, whose own wife was now among the accused, intervened. He dismissed the court of oyer and terminer and forbade further arrests. In total, over 200 people had been accused of witchcraft. 19 were hanged, at least 5 others died in the squalid prisons, and Giles Corey was pressed to death. The question that haunts us to this day is why? There is no single answer. Theories range from outright fraud by the young accusers for attention or malice, to long-standing family feuds and social anxieties boiling over. Some researchers have proposed ergotism, a poisoning from a fungus found on rye bread, which can cause convulsions and hallucinations. While this might explain the initial symptoms, it cannot account for the calculated legal proceedings that followed. The Salem witch trials were most likely the product of a perfect storm, a community steeped in fear, torn apart by internal strife, and primed by religious fanaticism to believe in a satanic enemy in their midst. It remains one of history's most profound cautionary tales about the dangers of mass hysteria, the failure of justice, and the deadly power of unchecked accusations.